Hi, welcome back to Examining Life, a life that's worth living. My name is Amanda. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's Wisdom Wednesday. First, I want to thank everyone who has subscribed, and if you haven't already, please go ahead and click the red rectangle to subscribe. And I also want to thank my patrons. Thank you very much for your donations. I greatly appreciate your support. I recently interviewed at the site of where Henry David Thoreau's cabin used to be, up at Walden Pond, and I was inspired by one of his quotes that they have on display there, which is today's Wisdom Wednesday quote. And so today's quote is, quote, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." End quote. As you can probably tell, there is definitely a lot of wisdom in this quote. I'm going to preface this by saying that I have not read the entirety of Walden, although I have read portions of Walden, which is where I believe Henry David Thoreau wrote this quote. So it's possible that some of my questions that I have here were answered in Thoreau's book and his other writings. Okay, so let's take the first part of the quote, where he says, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately." Although his cabin wasn't very far from civilization, the choice to isolate himself was a very brave thing to do, and making that choice was obviously done deliberately. He had very specific intentions for doing so, which he mentions in the quote. I'm sure he knew that it wouldn't be easy, but he purposefully took on the challenge because he saw value in what that experience would bring. So sometimes a lot of value can come from an occurrence or a situation or an event that might not be very easy, but the experience itself can yield important results. Next, there seems to be a connection that he directly makes between living deliberately and living in the woods. I wonder if this connection was from intuition or if he knew it as fact. Either way, how did he know that this connection between living deliberately and living in the woods would hold true, at least for him to accomplish his goals? What was it about living in the woods specifically that allowed him to live deliberately, which he could not achieve living in town? I have some assumptions, but I won't go into them here. Let me know what you think in the comments. He could have chosen many other locations to live deliberately, despite simply having access to Walden, due to Emerson's owning that portion of the land. I wonder why he made this choice, versus an infinite amount of other options, such as why didn't he go up to New Hampshire, for example. And as later mentioned in the quote, he wanted to front only the essential facts of life. Doing something intentionally to find the essential facts of life is immensely valuable. It would be unfortunate to spend a lifetime doing something that didn't actually matter or wasn't necessary. Of course, to some degree, what matters or what is necessary can differ from person to person based on values or circumstances, but I think it's still something important to think about. Of course, this is a very gray area because what is essential might vary from person to person. However, only to some degree. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there are some universally essential things that we all need. These basic needs include food, water, warmth, rest, safety, and security. And I think what differs are people's values, not necessarily the essentials of life. Furthermore, I understand that essential needs is different from essential facts of life. But consciously being aware of the essential needs, albeit it wasn't in the form of Maslow's hierarchy at the time, but basically Thoreau was probably aware of these basic survival needs, I suppose, because he needed to know how to survive and solve problems on his own that he would face living in the woods. Although it's likely that he already had some knowledge of survival skills prior to even making the decision to move to Walden, such as fishing, so he wasn't completely clueless about what was involved. Albeit, no matter how prepared he was, I'm sure he faced his challenges and knew that he was going to do so prior to moving to Walden. It was very honorable that he was willing to take on the challenge to search for these said essential facts of life. The end of living deliberately and living your life and seeing what was really necessary in life and seeing what really matters in life versus what you're told matters in life, or what people say is important but really isn't important. The end of living deliberately and living while he was alive and making that choice and taking on the challenge was worth the risk of any potential danger that he had or any challenge that he faced. That is one part of very important wisdom that is in this quote: deliberately searching for the essential facts of life, rather than simply going along with the crowd or allowing day-to-day drama to distract him from the big picture of what really matters. Thoreau's experiment reminds me of modern-day minimalism. Not only did he not have a lot of material possessions while he was in the woods, but also minimalism is a lot of deliberately purchasing things, or deliberately not purchasing things. Basically, minimalism is when a person chooses to get rid of the majority of his or her material possessions and only has what he or she really needs. And these needs do not necessarily coincide with what society or advertisements say we need. Minimalism is a way of life that is very intentional and values the essentials of life. I would say minimalism has been a response to the overwhelmingness of a consumer economy. In general, many people keep acquiring more stuff, even when much of the stuff isn't used and simply sits there and takes up space. Furthermore, having a lot of stuff does not, in and of itself, make people happier. There is something to be said for the very conscious decision that a minimalist makes when he or she decides to consume a good of any kind. Whether minimalism or living in the woods, there are important lessons that can be learned from doing so. Okay, so moving on to the last part of the quote. The last part of the quote states, "And not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." It would be very unfortunate to be on your deathbed and realize that you didn't live, or didn't live the life that you wanted, or a life that would have been more fulfilling. Now, what constitutes as living is different for different people, so you can define that as you see fit. Do you live deliberately? If so, what do you do to live deliberately? What are your essential facts of life? And what do you do to ensure that you get the most out of life? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this week's Wisdom Wednesday. Tune in this weekend to see what visitors at Walden Pond said about living deliberately. And please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Stay tuned every Wednesday. Thank you. Happy travels. Bye.